oh, am I going to get that bonus? Am I going to get that award for what I'm doing here and now? While you're in the middle of directing a scene or you're watching a scene play out, the time that you're spending lost in that land of thought, you're not fully engaged with the thing that you're doing anymore, right? Because you're thinking of the transaction. Is this job that I'm doing as a director gonna get me this?
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Hey there, podcast people. Welcome to another episode of Way of the Artist. This is going to be a kind of free-form conversation. We're just going to get into it. We don't even know exactly what we're talking about here. Today, we don't have a specific topic to cover. And these are kind of interesting conversations because they are really kind of throwing it up and seeing what happens, seeing what comes out. I think also what's kind of cool is you guys get to hear a little bit of us just kind of talking and working our way through art, which I think is always kind of neat. So I don't know if there's anything that's been on your mind recently, Evan, but there's been a couple interesting things for me that have happened late. So I don't know. You got anything you want to add?
Oh yeah, no, it's just like these conversations are kind of fun because it's like you're just sort of intuitively feeling your way through it, and just kind of pay attention. What are some of the interesting threads that come up to pull on and seeing where it will go, what you might discover. We used to do these a lot more often. We used to, our old podcast, the B&E, we used to do the Not So Serious Sunday ones where so it was a regular thing that we did. And, I don't know, maybe it's something we should do a little bit more often because like, as you said, they kind of give a little lens into, in some ways, just a free form, creative kind of exploration, which is, an essential part for, incorporating, sort of a philosophy of artistry, into your life and just sort of seeing where it will go, where it will take you. Sometimes it takes you somewhere great. Sometimes it just kind of, it's usually interesting at some level, but you never know. So, and it's also kind of a window into how we often come up with our topics, when we're a little bit more directed and planned, or it's like, this is kind of how it starts out. It's usually a conversation where we're just sort of seeing what's there, what's going on for you, what's going on for me, what's something you've read, what's something you've seen, what's something that's of interest and curiosity to you. Like we talk about that a lot on the podcast of like curiosity, that power of curiosity. Well, what happens if you just give some attention to something that's maybe just a small curiosity at this point? What can become of a small curiosity? Can it become something more? Does it maybe not go anywhere? But the beauty of following that is it usually takes you to whatever the next thing is. You'll find the thing that's actually got more pull, more weight, more gravity behind it. So, So why don't you go ahead, Brandon? What's going on for you? Or did you want to add something to what I just said?
Well, I will say, just to add to what you said before I get into any of that, is that, a lot of, I think, the creative process is about venturing down roads that seem interesting, that you're curious about. And sometimes they don't lead very far. Sometimes they lead just to dead ends, or you end up just with like a massive left turn or something, and you don't expect it, but you kind of have to walk down the road a little bit to explore it and see where it is. So anyway, to send us down a road, something that's kind of been interesting for me recently is I've had I would say the luxury of being able to sit in on some really, really big meetings, like meetings for like movies that are about to be made this year and next, some that are actually already being made right now. And these movies, a lot of them, their budgets are like in the 15 to $30 million range. Um, Producers who are, big in the studio system, hearing them talk, hearing the meetings and hearing the interactions and how a lot of this stuff comes together. And it's such a fascinating side of it all, because I think when you're like a young filmmaker, you have these ideas of how the business of film works. And when you actually get to sit in on the meetings, I think there's a couple of things that I found really interesting. One is that, you know, as I'm sitting in on these meetings, I'm always thinking, you really got to think bigger. You really want to think big. You don't want to be thinking small. The way people talk is they're looking at a bigger picture, and they don't seem to. It's not about like I think from an indie filmmaker point of view, when you're like as a director, right? If you want to be like a filmmaker director, you might be thinking, okay, well, how am I going to get my first film made? And maybe you only got a few grand, or maybe it's 10 grand, or maybe you can only scrap together a little bit of money. And those types of films, I was talking to some of my producing friends, people who are doing like really big movies. Like I'm talking name actors, I'm talking people you'll know, like I'm talking stuff that, gets nominated, I'm like these kind of films. And I was asking them like, well, like, how do you guys choose a director? How does this happen? And so much of it from a director point of view or a writer point of view is they just want somebody with a track record. So a lot of what they're trying to do is they're trying to pick somebody who has done something in that genre well. Generally, they're looking for that. So from a creative point of view, I think, yeah, independently, you want to just kind of like get a film made, even if it's only for a few grand. It's not about your film doing anything. It's not about it like winning some big awards. It might do well in festivals or whatever. But what you really want to do is you want to demonstrate that you can do that genre or that style effectively. And then from the producer point of view, one of the most interesting things I found is like you have teams of people. So what I found kind of fascinating was each person kind of brings a team of people to a production. And these teams become kind of collaborations. And that's a lot of how a lot of these movies get made. So one of the other pieces of advice that I would pass on to people who are kind of just trying to break in and they're wondering how all this works is start putting together a team. Start putting together a team of people who are good at their jobs, who are effective, and who help you, and you can help them. Because the whole idea of just being this kind of lone wolf, like this island of a creative, is actually not all that effective when it comes to stuff like making movies and getting stuff done. And what you really want is you want your team to be able to come together with another team and create a collaboration. And as these teams kind of collaborate, they sometimes begin to work together on more films, and sometimes they kind of realize that they got to part ways. But it's a fascinating thing, just kind of watching the deal making happen. Another thing I'll just mention just before I pass it on to you is that every team brings certain things to the table. And what you want is you want to figure out like, okay, what are we good at doing? Like what's our angle? What's our thing? Maybe like one team, for example, was really good at getting grants. So they were affiliated with a production that, I was kind of sitting in on, you know what I mean? And their ability to say, help get a film made in Canada for less money was one of their key features of their group, which allowed them to kind of parlay their team into some bigger productions. So, I think there's the creative side of art, but there's also this other side of art of like, what's the practicality of getting it done? And I just thought it was interesting. There's so many things I could say, but one of the big takeaways I'll just share for now is just like teamwork is such a huge element. And we don't always talk about that, but, finding like-minded people and finding people that assist you in whatever you're trying to do is a really important part of the artist journey.
Yeah. Yeah, like collaboration is such a big part of the artist world, and it's, this is funny that this is coming up because I'm like, have we like that seems like a pretty neglected subject, that for us. But and film is one of those things where it's like, because there's so many people involved, right? Like, it's arguably, I would say, like, film is maybe the most collaborative artistic medium that there is. Like, there's just so many hands involved in making it happen. But even in almost any place, there's collaboration has to enter at some point. You could be a solo artist, whether that's a musician or a visual artist, whatever. At some point, there's a collaboration. At some point, there's an area where you have to share at some degree. You need to be working with someone who can, give you a place to perform, or give you a place to have an exhibit, who's working with you on something. If you're a writer, eventually at some point, you're working with an editor. Typically at some point in time, you need somebody else to take a look at it. Any writer who doesn't have like someone like, to look at their stuff at some point, like that's just unheard of. So there's always this element of working together to do something more than you can necessarily do on your own. Even in all kinds of ways that this is applicable to our lives, that goes beyond artistic mediums. I found myself even just yesterday, I was sitting down, I have my own meditation practice, but I was recognizing yesterday how much I really need to find a group. How much I was like, oh yeah, I miss this, because there's something, there is something that is very individual about a practice of meditation. Like it's something that probably more often than not is something that you do on your own. Because the very nature of meditation is a very private kind of experience. But at the same time, there's something that happens when you get together with a group of people and you sit in the same room together. Even though nobody's, saying a word to each other, everyone's just sitting around in silence. There is this level of I don't know, there's a kind of inspiration that's there with you that helps you to just keep your focus a little bit more. It can just, there's an assist that happens there that you can walk away with. So it's like, that's a collaboration of people coming together with a similar interest, who on some level are recognizing that together we can go further than we can on our own.
Yeah. I hear that. I mean, I think that collaboration is such a key element. We don't talk about it a lot, but I mean, you and I making this podcast is a collaboration. 100%. I know there's a lot of things that have, if we look back at our own artist careers, collaboration has been a really big part of it all. And I think one of the things that, I think we're all being reminded of, especially in these times, is how important it is that we are connected, and how important it is that we communicate and work together, and that we don't let ourselves just be divided individually and stuff like that. I think that one of the key things about collaboration is that you want to come in with something to offer. And that's a really, really important element. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, they go to collaboration to look for something to get. And I think that's a mistake. I think if you really, truly want to create something and you want to build something, you have to go into it going like, this is what I have to offer. and you try to bring as much as what you have to offer in. And at the same time, by doing that, when someone is there just to get, you need to kind of move away from that person and find people that are there to contribute, find people who are there who have something to offer. Because collaboration doesn't work if you get a bunch of people together who are just trying to use each other and get something off each other. It doesn't work well. But when you have a bunch of people that have something specific to offer, then you build something. And one of my producing mentors was saying to me, you don't make a deal with anybody. Don't give them any percentage of anything that you have or anything that you're doing until they can contribute like what you agree on and what you need. So like he was saying, like one of the mistakes a lot of people make is they say, okay, you know what, you're good, I'm good, let's work together and here's the percentages. And they do that right off the bat. And he was pointing out that it's like, that's actually a mistake. And that's usually what gets people into a lot of trouble. What you do is you say, I'm creating this thing. There's 50% on the table or 25% or whatever the hell it is, 75%. This is what's needed to get done to get this percentage of it. And so then that person has to deliver. And if they deliver, then they're entitled to X percent based on delivering what they actually say they'll do. Because part of the problem with collaborations, and I think we all learn this in school, is you get that one person in your group and they just mail it in while everyone else does the work. Well, this happens in business as well. It happens in art as well. So collaboration needs to be, it's only really most effective when you have people who have something to offer, and you need to hold them accountable to what they say they will offer. And it's not just about saying you can offer it, it's about actually doing it. And this is an important element in the whole collaboration process.
Yeah. And that's something that, I remember reading about in the E-Myth. I can't remember the guy who wrote that, but it's a great book. Yeah. And for anybody who's interested in learning, just like, it's one of the best books on entrepreneurship that's ever been written. But anyhow, he talks about that in terms of in business, you have a partner. It's everyone has to have clearly laid out responsibilities. This is what you're responsible for. This is what I'm responsible for. This is whatever. And everyone agrees, okay, and that might cause people who are sort of the artistic, creative minded, even though entrepreneurship is an incredibly creative endeavor. But, a lot of artists sort of shirk from that idea. It's like, well, let's let it flow and let's let it, hey, yeah, like there is a truth in that as well. You have to let things flow. You have to let things slide. You have to be able to flex, in order to accomplish things too. That's an incredibly important way of being able to approach any sort of large collaborative effort. Like everyone has to be able to flex a little bit in order to achieve those things that you've set out. But at the same time, it's like those clearly laid out things help to keep things on track. It helps the vision to come to life. And I think that the best way to look at something like that, in case anybody's having an issue with it, is that, that type of thing is not, don't look at it so much as like this hard, rigid, it's like, this is what you do, this is what I do. It doesn't have to be a cold thing at all. That is an agreement, it's a bond that you're forming with somebody, right? Like that's a part of how you are collaborating together. And I would say even look at it as an act of kindness, because it's an act of kindness for everybody to know where they stand and what they're responsible for. It prevents confusion. It prevents potential future hostilities or resentments, all kinds of complications that can come out of people not knowing, what they're responsible for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a big part. I mean, like if you there should never in a collaboration, mailing it in should not be a something that you can be rewarded for. It's really important that people, if they try to mail it in, if they don't do their part, if they say like I'll get this done and then they don't get it done, that they by not achieving what they said they would do, there's a consequence for it. I think, I think this is interesting. Collaboration is an interesting thing because it is kind of the business side of art, right? Like working together with people. I mean, a marriage in a lot of ways is business, and people don't always like to look at it that way because it seems very cold. But the thing is that you don't need a parasite in your life as an artist, and you don't need it ever. So there are lots of people that will be parasitical on artists and creatives and producers and people who actually get stuff done and want to make stuff happen. And so it's your responsibility to not only be able to identify when someone's trying to do that, but to mitigate the potential of that ever happening. One of the things that people could do if, say, they wanted to get into producing a movie is that they could, they could look at the assistant, the associate producer type of model, right? The associate producer model, whereas like you might connect a creative project with money, and you don't necessarily raise the money, but you can connect. So somebody who has money who might want to get involved in film, and you connect them with an actual film that with somebody who actually is making something real that will make money. No, I'm not talking about your buddy, like your independent buddy.
Yeah.
Who's like, I really want to make a film one day. It's like, no, not that person. A person who is an organized film production company, or producer. And if you can connect them to money, now you might gap their financing by like, maybe it's $100,000, maybe it's a few $100,000, maybe it's $1 million, maybe it's 10 or 20,000, although, who knows? But the thing is just your ability to bring money to a production. It does a bunch of things for you. One, it creates a relationship now with you and the producers who are making the movie. It gets you a credit, most likely, if you make that deal, and you might actually make some money on the back end. Using that to parlay getting your next film made or getting involved in more films and building your credits and getting connected would be a really great move. And really, the job is quite simple. Can you connect two parties that can collaborate together effectively? You don't even, your collaboration isn't even really anything other than being able to make a good introduction and be able to help something get done.
Yeah.
But, I think one of the things that people need to think about whenever they're looking at collaboration is, what do I have of value to bring to the table? Because if you're trying to look at like, how do I get a associate producer credit? How do I make some money off of a film? That's the wrong way to look at it. Yeah. I mean, yes, those things will take care of themselves if you actually bring value and you work with good people, right? So yeah, I think also like one of the things for artists to keep in mind, and I guess this is kind of advice just people in general, is that, you vet people out and you really are honest with yourself about the people who you're collaborating with. Because some people, I'm not going to say like there are just bad actors out there, bad people, right? They are out there and they're looking to like, they're looking to grift, they're looking to take from you, they're looking to steal, they're looking for ways to just kind of take advantage, right? There are those people, and those obviously are very clear. Stay away from that type of person. But there's also good people who sometimes end up realizing that it's easier to not work when you give them the opportunity, and you actually set them up to not have motivation to pull their weight. And so it's your responsibility, especially as like a visionary or a creative, to give people motivation to participate, and that there's something they give up by not putting something in, right? And this way, collaboration becomes a very like giving and building upon idea, I mean, these are
Yeah.
things I wish I knew when I was younger, because I definitely made some of those mistakes where, what I would do is someone wouldn't do their job and I would just pick up the slack for them.
Yeah.
And then that works sometimes. Sometimes you need to do that. But if you do that too much, what ends up happening is the person goes, well, if I just don't do it, Brandon will come pick up the slack for me. No problem. And in
Yeah.
some ways, I've turned them into essentially a parasitical type of player on the thing we're doing, because they realize, well, hey, if I don't do it, it's going to get done anyway. So, you
Yeah.
know, right.
Yeah, or they can be like, "Oh, well, I'm not doing it right, so I'm just going to step back." And then, you're not
Another good point.
a person's not really contributing in the best way that they're able to. You're
Right.
not they're not really able to put their best foot forward. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like there's a couple of themes that you've touched upon there. Like one is definitely leadership, I think, because like a great leader connects people to, connects people to a vision, connects people to something that's bigger than all of them, that you're all working together to do together, right? And that's something that, is missing a lot in our culture, and also tied into that came up for me with what you were saying, is this attitude that we have, particularly in the Western world, where we treat everything as transactional, and we don't, in collaboration, the best collaborations aren't treated as transactional. It's yes, everyone has agreed upon, their role, and the responsibility to achieving that bigger thing. But, when you have a bunch of people who, their main thing is just about like what they're going to get out of it at the end of the day. And don't get me wrong, that's a tricky thing. And I'm not opposed to, like having success and and material gain or whatever it is, at the end of it. But there's got to be something more that's bringing you together with these people.
Yeah.
Like there has to be something. There has to be. I mean, this is honestly, like, this has got to be the way of the future for any type of collaborative effort. And there's a lot of people, I bring him up a lot on the show, but Simon Sinek, this is a big part of his sort of mission. And it's like, this needs to be about something more than just, having bigger profits, this year from last year, or this quarter from last quarter. What's actually bringing all of these people together? What are you actually doing? That's beyond that, and he's talking about that in the business sense, and certainly in the artistic world, that's got to be a priority. Hey, it's Evan with a quick public service announcement. If you're enjoying the conversation you're hearing and finding it helpful, then please help us and take a second to subscribe to the podcast. And we can all be people helping other people, and that's awesome. Now back to the show.
I mean, it's all business at the end of the day. Like everything is business and everything is sales. And people don't like to acknowledge this all the time, particularly artists, I think, because it makes the world sometimes seem kind of cold. I mean, even a marriage is a business to some degree. Like you're bringing assets together, you're doing this stuff. But if you treat it like a business and you behave in a cold way, it becomes a cold thing. There's a collaboration doesn't have to be cold, and it doesn't have to be this, like, it can still be a family. It can still be a friendship. There can still be, a emotional connection and a vision. And when you're making a film, for example, or you're getting married, you're not getting married, hopefully. Although I'm sure there's those out there who do, but you're not getting married because, hey, let's bring our assets together, or, let's get married because, it's easier on life. Like you're getting married because you actually, I mean, hopefully in Western culture, or you're making a movie because you have a vision, because you believe in something good. You believe that the combination of these things is going to make life better, that there's something that's going to,
there's something more that's bringing you together than
so collaboration is not just about working together. It's about it's better than its parts, right? That's kind of a really key element to remember. And when you have faith that you're building something that's better than its parts, you don't necessarily always know how much better it's going to be or what the potential. You kind of have faith that when you develop something better than its parts, that there will be rewards in place at that point, and I think particularly when you're starting out, like as an entrepreneur or as an artist, what you're doing is you're basically betting on yourself, and you're betting on these things you're creating to pay out later, like that, especially in the beginning. I think later on you can have a track record, and it's easier to kind of organize your reward up front. But that's based on the proven fact that you figured out how to collaborate and make something better, by coming together and bringing value, or at least putting value together that compounds its creative output ultimately at the end. One other thing, Evan, I want to mention this because I think it was a really interesting point you brought up. Yeah, like this whole idea of making things transactional. It's not transactional when it's based on vision and it's based on building something like that's better for its parts coming together. Transactional is very like, I want a coffee and I give you X amount of money and you give me the coffee. That's transactional, but there's really been no growth. There's been no real evolution or vision that's occurred. That's transaction is very momentary. It's very minimal. And there's not a lot of memorable exchange that happens in a transactional collaboration. We're talking more about like the compound impact of how coming together you build something that's much bigger than the initial interactions and the initial exchanges.
Because it's, we're obviously we're talking about, things through the artistic lens, like we're talking about acts of creativity, which, as we've discussed many times before, is kind of a pioneering spirit. It's a stepping into the unknown, not knowing what's going to necessarily come out at the other end. And in a collaboration, you are agreeing to do that with a few other people. You're agreeing to step into that unknown space together, with as much willingness and passion as possible. And that kind of environment, a transactional attitude doesn't really work when that's what you're trying to do. It's like, it's one of those things where it's, it's been an idea that's been in humanity for a long time is this idea of action without expectation. The doing something for its own sake because there's something worthy about doing it just for itself. And then basically letting the fruits of your efforts go to a certain extent. And very often part of when you embrace that idea is that actually more success does indeed come your way from that attitude, but you have to genuinely be in something for its own sake, within in creativity, especially because that's how you're actually free to follow the passion, to follow your intuitions and the things that come up during that process, because it is a process. It's unfolding. It's not, you don't have a completed project, a finalized thing before you've even started making it, like it's a shifting organic type of thing that you're involved with in artistry and creativity. And so you have to have freedom there, and you lose out on that essential freedom that you need to really fully do something, which was something that you talked about a few episodes back, but to really fully do something, and to fully do something creatively and artistically, you have to be free of so many of these different binds. And, I think a few episodes back, we were talking about that in relationship to the ego, like how the ego has to take a step back in order for you to be free to create, so that you can really do the thing. And I think that the transactional thing is an interesting little branch of that, because that whole transactional attitude, you're in the middle of, whatever the hell it is, like directing. We'll use directing because it seems to be the craft of choice for today. But if you're a director and your mind is on, oh, am I going to get that bonus? Am I going to get that award for what I'm doing here and now? While you're in the middle of directing a scene, or you're watching a scene play out, the time that you're spending lost in that land of thought, you're not fully engaged with the thing that you're doing anymore, right? Because you're thinking of the transaction. Is this job that I'm doing as a director gonna get me this? And for one, it's like you can't know that. There's so many things you don't know. It's like, oh, is this gonna do so well at the box office that I get that bonus? That whatever. Like, it's just you can't have your mind there. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like all of that stuff could happen. All of that stuff could happen. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's that transaction can't be the main thing. If you really want to do something, artfully, masterfully, your mind can't be in that place.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I know that makes 100% sense to me. I mean, I think what you're talking about is an interesting version of transaction, where it's like, if you're doing the thing to get the reward, you're not really doing the thing. I think that it's important and valid to do things with excellence. Like, to look at things in terms of, okay, well, what do I need to do to play at that level, to play at that standard, to play, in that arena? I think that's an important element of everything we do. I think, one of my producing mentors always says, you want everything to be at the standard of world class, and there's no reason why you should ever settle for less than whatever world class is. Now, one of the hardest things for me when I was first kind of learning about this concept, this way of thinking, was like, well, what is world class? And you actually have to figure that out. Like, that's not intrinsically like evident. It's one of those things where you have to do some investigation. You kind of have to look out there and remove yourself personally from what you've done, and really try to look at like, what makes this world class? And that could be anything. It could be a painting, it could be building a website, it could be making a movie. It doesn't really matter. But what makes this world class? And then once you think that you have an idea of what that is, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're correct, but hopefully you are, that you start to do the things that make something world class based on whatever you figured out. Now, will it be world class? Will it be world class of world class? I mean, that's, who knows, right? Who knows at that point? But you do try to put your best foot forward. I think that's an important thing. I think that one of the things I kind of started this conversation with was something that I'm realizing as I sit in on these meetings, is that there's, how do you put it? You can look at things transactionally. You can look at things like, how do we make money? Or you can look at things like, what are we doing here? Like, what are we really trying to do here? And something that I've been kind of learning as I've been able to sit on some of these conversations, without name dropping, because I don't think it really matters, but like, to hear these people talk has been enlightening to me, because I understand now why people are world class. I understand, because they don't talk about how do we make how do we, like, that's assumed. Like, to some degree, it's assumed that what they're going to do is going to succeed. Like, there's always the potential that it might not, but like, that's not what they're after. Like, for example, one of the producers asked the other one, he said, "Are you going to be taking a fee on this?" And the producer's response was like, "Yeah, I probably will. When we get over here and we get this stuff put together, yeah, I'll probably do that." And he goes, "Yeah, you should." He's like, "Yeah, I will when we get there." He wasn't even concerned about his fee.
Yeah.
That's not what he was doing. He's like, "Let's get the job done. Let's put the right pieces together. Let's make the great movie." He wasn't concerned at all about what does he get out of it personally. And what was really interesting was watching the other producer say, "You should make sure that you get a fee as well." And what you had is, I saw that as beautiful collaboration, because you had your team member looking out for you as opposed to you trying to look out for yourself. And that's a great collaboration. That's when you got people around who aren't just trying to get, they're trying to look after each other. They're trying to make sure that everybody feels good and is taken care of. And it's, and I could see them. I was watching them because I believe that these teams are, this studio and this production company are one of their first big collaborations together. And I could see they weren't just building this film, they were building the next 10 films they were doing together. And that to me was really exciting, to be able to sit in and watch how this film was just a step in a much bigger relationship and a much bigger process they were trying to build.
Yeah. Just this attitude of like, let's prosper together, that, and I like it too, because like, the assumption that it's going to do well, because I think that's something that I think sometimes we give more attention and focus than we need to when we set out to do something. Like there was a video I remember, Bryan Cranston had shared some advice for actors, and like,
Yes.
and auditioning. And he was saying he's like, don't go in there to get the job. He's like, go in there and do your job, right? Give a performance, do what you do. And I don't know if he actually said this in the video, but it was something that I took away from it, kind of in addition to what the wisdom of what he was already sharing. But it kind of made me realize, like, the fact that you want the job, of course you want the job, it's that goes without saying. More likely than not, you want to book the part, you want to get the thing. You want the film to make money. You want, to be able to pay your bills, like it's that goes without saying, that those things are there. So it's, I think we sometimes spend too much time worrying and concerning ourselves with that kind of thing than is necessary. That there's something that's like, that doesn't need to be said, so let's just not even put our attention there. Like, let's put our attention on putting the right people together, making the best fucking movie that we can make, and a movie that we believe in the people that are behind it and creating it, and even the message that it sends, whatever it is, like all of those things. Like, those are the things that bring passion, and those things that you believe in, on a deeper level than paying the bills type of thing. It's just like, yeah. That will take care of itself. We're not going to worry so much about that. Right. But let's just do this thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that sort of story, that little window into that world, because I think a lot of people can get, particularly in film, can be pretty cynical about the industry, and just like, it's just a bunch of suits who want to rake in cash. And don't get me wrong, there are people out there who are like that for sure, but not as many as you think. Like, there's so many other ways to make a shit ton of money in this world than making movies. You know, like making movies is a pretty high risk business to get yourself involved in. The only reason why most people do it is because they have a passion for it at some level.
Well, it's something I've been learning as I've been going down this road, is that it's not as high risk as it seems when you're working with the right people, because there are people out there who consistently do well. And I'm not just talking about studios and stuff like that. I'm talking about there are people out there who consistently make movies, and you might not know who some of these people are because they're not like Quentin Tarantino or Martin Scorsese or like, you know, Jerry Bruckheimer or somebody that everybody knows because it's like the head of the biggest movies all the time, right? But there's these people who do very, very well being like producers or being people who are a part of productions that are just names that you wouldn't really know about, like people who they're just good at putting the right pieces together, or they're not even they're just not the famous ones. And I think that there's this assumption, I know that I had it for a little while, that, you know, you had to be the guy, you know, when you're making a movie, you had to be this like central piece to it. And what I've been starting to realize more and more is that there are many pieces to the puzzle, and sometimes being a smaller piece to a bigger puzzle can have you an incredible career and a lot of incredible options. And by the way, there's a lot of people who have stepped into those like roles where they've been the person, they become the person, but after building a career based on doing collaborations and things that helped other things get made, you know, and while they were doing that, they were learning and they were growing and they were making connections. And when their time came where they said, hey, you know, I want to do this, I want to lead something like this, they had the people in place and the infrastructure in place to help them do it. And, you know, I think one of the things that's been very interesting for me, like being able to sit in on these types of meetings and be invited to be a part of this, you know, and get this incredible education, is that like, I went out and made films as a young man. I did some stuff. I made some stuff, you know, independently. I learned how to raise some money, and I did what I could do, right? And then I started to realize that a lot of people just wanted to make films, but it was overwhelming and it was scary. So I said, well, I'll teach some of the people like what I've learned. And, you know, what I learned is that there's always a way to make a film. You just sometimes need to be a little bit more humble about getting your foot in the door, getting things going. And my learning how to make films and teach people how to do it was what got me some notice from some of these bigger producers who were like, hey, this is pretty cool. This kid, you know, has taught people make some pretty good films and, you know, do this stuff. And that's what's given me the option to get into the door for this stuff. So, you know, I'm kind of, sometimes I think, oh man, like I've been in this industry for so long. And then other times I'm like, wow, I feel like my whole career is just starting. Like, it's like, you know what I mean? Because you just, it's so much about your connections and your collaboration, especially with film. It's such an important thing because who you know, it's not just about who you know. I don't like that when people go, oh, it's all about who you know. It is about who you know. It's about who you help. It's not about who you know. It's about who you help. It's about who you contribute to. It's about you being of value to other people. And when you are of value consistently, they give you value, you know? And I feel like in my own way, I've been valuable to these people and they trust me. They bring me into meetings that like so many people will never in their entire life experience. And they might have been in film for their whole life. Like there's been meetings that I've been in that like just to sit down for dinner with me and pick my brain about that would be worth your whole film education. Like I could tell you things that I've been able to be a fly on the wall for, that I've been on the inside of to experience, that people walk around their whole life mystified by. They just don't even understand how that works. And I could give you the credibility, but I feel like that's not even important. The thing is that what I'm saying is that if you offer value, you get opportunities and you get possibilities that are just not available if you don't. And if you're not worried about trying to get something, if you're focused on what you can give, people want to give to you. It's like this law of reciprocation. It's a really important element of the collaboration, this contribution, reciprocation, it's all a part of the same pie. And if it's missing an ingredient, the pie doesn't taste good anymore and you don't want it. So, all of those are like key ingredients in this thing. I just made that analogy and I'm pretty proud of myself.
Hey, man, it's always, any situation's always better when there's pie involved.
Totally.
Well, let's take a quick beer break.
Sure.
Here.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm drinking a beer from, is that actually, oh no, okay. I was like, what's happening here? That's not the brewery. This is from, I'm drinking something from Boombox Brewing Company. I don't know if I've ever had
Boombox before. What'd you get?
Oh, it's brewed at Parallel 49. Interesting. I wonder if Boombox is they're kind of like a
collaboration?
Like a collaboration.
Isn't Boombox a brewery?
It is.
Yeah.
It is a Boombox Brewing Company, but it says that it was brewed at Parallel 49 Brewing Company. So maybe it's a collaboration, or maybe they're kind of like a sister kind of brewery to them. Anyhow, this one's called Arcade Glow Pale Ale. So it's good.
I like the name. Good. Can you show me the can there?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that looks cool.
Yeah, it's kind of got like a vintage sort of like CRT television, like and digital, like that sort of 8-bit text on it. But very sort of simple design. It's cool. Nice. And it's good. It's real good. So happy with that today.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I bought a whole bunch of different beers from Four Winds. And I just drank them all. And I had all these different Four Winds beers I was going to bring onto the podcast. I'm like, which one do I bring? And then I ended up just drinking all the various ones that I had. They were all great. But I was like, okay, I got to leave one for this podcast. I can't have them all. But I've been enjoying them. And I'm having something that I never really have. It's a wild saison.
Oh.
And it's you might have had this once before, I don't know, but it's called La Maison.
I don't think I've had that one, but I've had a saison or two.
Yeah, well, it's pretty good. I mean,
they're kind of a citrusy wheat kind of beer, aren't they?
Yeah,
a little bit sour, but not super sour.
Yeah, it's kind of. I'm experiencing this one to be a little bit almost like a light lager, but then with like a little bit of sour, a little bit of wheat kind of flavor to it.
And it's good?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, it's very refreshing. The aftertaste of it, well, not that that's bad or anything, is a little bit unique to me, considering like most of the kind of standard beers that I have. But it's good. It's been really refreshing. I've enjoyed it. So what can I say? Thumbs up.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I mean,
yeah.
I guess we're kind of this has been a great one. Like this one actually kind of just found a fairly clear direction. I feel.
I really did.
You brought a like kind of a really fantastic real life example of something, which it's like to anyone listening, like this is how you can kind of really go into stuff, like explore some of these experiences that you've had, something interesting that you saw or heard or have been thinking about, like just probe into it a little bit, see what's there, because this one had all sorts of cool directions and interesting stuff for us to explore today, from leadership and of course collaboration, which is the huge thing, and and how we're viewing what we're doing, whether it's something that we're doing out of passion and care, or are we approaching something with a transactional mindset? There's a lot to sort of recap in this one, and I guess I'll just sort of come back into, because I guess collaboration was I would say the main thing that we were talking about today, but like all of life is a collaboration. Like one of our laws is the law of relationship, right? Like everything is relationship. Well, collaboration is pretty much like is riding passenger seat, the whole way with relationship, right? Like it's collaboration is all about relationship. Having good relationships with people is really what it's all about. It's like, as you said, that it's all about who you know. Well, it's like, it's all about your relationships. Do you have good, conducive relationships? It's not just about having a relationship with somebody because of what they can get you. That relationship needs to be built on something else. It's a shared passion. It's a shared interest. It's a respect for one another, and a willingness to see, and open up to where you can go together, without that sense of expectation, and seeing, just how everyone can potentially prosper through a relationship like that. And yeah, I'll leave it there. So this is good.
All right. So, I mean, I would say, everybody, like, people don't always like to admit this. They don't like to acknowledge this, because I think we have this weird kind of relationship to this idea in our culture, but like everybody is selfish to some degree. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think we need to stop looking at that as a negative. I think it's okay to have personal desires and things you want and things that you're looking to get in your life. I think that it's really important. Not only do you acknowledge your own kind of selfishness, but you acknowledge that that's in other people as well. And people who pretend not to be selfish are usually maybe this is personal opinion, but they tend to be the most selfish of all, because it's like, it's a lie. It's nobody is this pristine, perfect thing that is just totally selfless, because to be selfless is actually a flaw. Like, to be so selfless that you don't even think about yourself is actually a flaw, because a disconnection to self is a disconnection to other. And I think as you're figuring out how to go through and collaborate, the reason why I bring this up is that it's actually a sign of care to know what everyone you're collaborating with wants. It's your job, in a way, to make sure that they get what they want. And when you collaborate, what you're saying is, come together with me and I will help you get what you want. And if you work with people who everybody is trying to make sure everybody gets what they want, then selfishness becomes a beautiful thing. It actually becomes a very self-full thing, because now you're contributing. Now you're building something together. And if everybody wins, you're just going to want to continue to expand and grow and build with these people that you're connecting with. So I think, it's okay to be like, well, hey, look, I really want these things. I want to succeed in my career. I want to make a lot of money. I want to, win awards or whatever. It's nothing wrong with that, but be honest about it. Just be honest about, okay, these are things I want, and try to learn what other people want. Care about what they want like you care about what you want. And then look at it in terms of, how do I get what I am after by helping other people get what they're after? Because the way you're going to get most of what you want is through the means of others helping you. We are a humanity works best when we work together. And if you have to do everything yourself, it's going to be really, really hard. But if you start getting allies, if you start getting people who are looking out for you, people who are trying to help you achieve what you're trying to do, then not only is life going to be easier for you, but if you're helping them, you're going to make life easier for them. And if it's easier for all of you, it's just an expansive, beautiful, wonderful thing. And at the end of the day, man, that is collaboration.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.